Our guest this hour is the recipient of the American Public Television National Programming Excellence Award, and he's the winner of 6 regional Emmy Awards. Director and producer Tim Gray, along with the nonprofit World War II Foundation, has produced 40 documentary films on the personal stories of World War II. His latest is called Miles, Morale, and Memories, Bob Hope and World War II. Tim Gray, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be on.
Well, we're happy to have you. Bob Hope's one of my favorite topics on this program. And I would think, having produced so many documentaries that focus on World War II, that Bob Hope's work with the USO must have always been lingering there in the background in your work. Is this the first time that he's been the focus?
He's had a few films done on him, which have included his time a little bit in World War II. But this being the 80th anniversary of the end of the war this year, we wanted to focus more on his travels during the war and what they went through when they went to the Pacific or Europe to put on a show for the servicemen and women who were out there. And the deeper we got into it, just a lot of aspects of the film were just mind-boggling. The travel was 80,000 miles, basically between 1942 and 1945. They almost crashed several times, the plane, Bob Hope's plane, and the letters that he would receive, he was receiving 38,000 letters a week from servicemen and their families. I mean, it was just staggering, the amount of numbers that started to come out of this when we started to really look into his time during World War II.
Yeah, we had talked about this on a previous show with one of Bob's writers, Martha Bolton. She had an excellent book on letters that GIs would give to Bob to deliver to their families when he returned to the States, and Bob would do it.
Once in a while, a service member would give him a letter and say, "Hey, Bob, next time you're in Los Angeles, could you just deliver this to my parents and let them know I'm okay?" And he'd take that letter back with him on the plane, and then the parents would get a knock at the door, and Bob Hope's at your door, and he's got a letter from your son from the Pacific or wherever. They would also ask him to call relatives. He would get requests, "Here's my phone number back home. Give my wife a call, let her know I'm okay." And he would do that as well. So these were things that just popped up when we were doing our research that just really made that whole time seem even a little bit more extraordinary to the lengths that people went just to kind of, win that war.
It seems that at that time, all of Hollywood was behind the war effort, and you had things like the Hollywood Canteen, where soldiers could come and, forget their troubles for a while. In fact, it seemed like Hollywood had a moral responsibility to boost morale.
If you've ever been to Hollywood, one thing you're sure to remember is this converted barn in the heart of the city. Here, under the leadership of Betty Davis and John Garfield, all the guilds and unions in Hollywood have collaborated in creating and maintaining the Hollywood Canteen. More than 1 million servicemen of the United Nations have been entertained here by almost everybody in motion pictures. Most of its earlier guests are scattered all over the world by now. In the South Pacific, the Aleutians, the Middle East, ETO, Italy, well, let it go it all around the world. And to them, here's a message from one of the canteen's favorites, Miss Dinah Shore.
Hello, fellas. We had some guests of honor here the other night, convalescent men from an Army hospital. And they seemed so darn glad to see the canteen again that we thought maybe you'd like to take a look, especially you fellas who are so far away from home. So let's look around. You be our honored guest tonight. Okay? You're greeted at the door by Lana Turner, Deanna Durbin, and Marlena Dietrich. And you grab yourself a partner for some music by Xavier Kruger.
A lot of Hollywood's top directors even decided that they would leave Hollywood and go out and make war pictures at the front, or do documentary films, or training films. Everybody in Hollywood wanted to play a role, right down from the head of the studio down to the people who worked at the Hollywood Canteen, which was an incredible endeavor in California. So yeah, everybody just wanted to play a role, and it was a very patriotic time in the United States after the attack on Pearl Harbor. So Hollywood was no different than Middle America and everything else. They just wanted to do whatever they could to help move the war effort in a positive direction.
And from what I understand, Bob Hope visiting all these war-torn locales and in some places performing at the front line was not something that happened overnight. It really began with a suggestion from his radio producer.
That was at March Field in 1941, even before Pearl Harbor. His producer on his radio show, which was ranked #1 in the country, suggested that they go do a show for the military. I mean, these guys are in the military. They have no war to fight. They're kind of just in training mode. They think something's going to happen, but they don't know when. So he goes, and Bob is nervous, and his troupe is nervous because they'd never played a military audience before, and they weren't sure how they would be received. And it turns out it was just an amazing event for everybody, and it was enjoyed by the military that they decided at that point they would start to take the show out on the road in the United States. That led to, after Pearl Harbor, that led to taking the show on the road to Europe, to North Africa, and then the Pacific, and then back to Europe and Australia. So they did 80,000 miles, and that was just hard miles in propeller-driven planes. It's not like today where you get on a jet and you fly and you're sure you have a little jet lag. We're talking about before the jet age, really. And so they all were in these B-17 bombers or C-47 transport planes, things like that. So not pressurized. They were in there with cargo. It was just a lot of inconvenience, but they just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And by the end of the war, there was nobody bigger, I think, in Hollywood than Bob Hope as far as what he did for the military.
Thank you, fellas. No whistling. We'll have the place loaded with dogs. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, here we are at the Pasadena Army Service Forces Regional Hospital. That's an ambulatory phrase meaning don't step out the back door, Joe. It's a 100-foot drop to the sewer. Yes, sir, I've done a couple of shows in hospitals recently. I feel so much safer when there's a doctor close by. And this is a wonderful spot for a hospital. When a battle fatigue case comes in, and they can't calm him down and make him sleepy the usual way, they just give him a pass to go into Pasadena. Pasadena, that's the town where the curfew goes on at 12 noon. I want to tell you, it's a great place to live. Pasadena is a very quiet town. In fact, every time a soldier takes a walk, the Chamber of Commerce appoints a man to follow behind him and oil his GI shoes. Somebody ought to oil my tongue for a while here, too. And Pasadena is really a ritzy town. They're so fussy here, the mayor meets the Greyhound buses at the city limits with a can of flea powder. So ritzy, I put a nickel in a Pasadena jukebox to play one meatball, and it came out one caviar croquette. I saw one beautiful rich debutante here this afternoon, though. Boy, she was really loaded. She had money, too. But these soldiers aren't impressed with the local register here in Pasadena. When they go out with a girl, they don't care about who's who. They want to know it's what. This hospital used to be a hotel called the Vista de la Roya. That's a Spanish term meaning, why, Sergeant, the young lady was just admiring my cast, and we got so engrossed we must have strolled into Hollywood without knowing it.
And that group that would travel with Bob, and as you mentioned, it wasn't a glamorous traveling situation, that group of Jerry Colonna, Francis Langford, I mean, they became a family. Who else was in that group?
Jerry did most of it, and Francis did a lot of it. Patty Thomas was also there. Tony Romano, who was a gifted with the guitar. He traveled with them, but yeah, they kept the group small, and it was a small group. They would substitute a person here or there if someone could make a trip, but for the most part, that was the crew that went, and that was the crew that dealt with everything. And to look at the old archival and see video, to see these men and women laughing when they just come off a hard battle, or maybe they were headed into another hard fight. It gave them some respite there for an hour or so, where they could just laugh and enjoy pretty girls and jokes and music, and that's what the show was.
Patty, we're going to do a little scene for you now, ladies and gentlemen. You might enjoy it. It's a little scene that's set in Central Park. Shows a boy and a girl walking through the park. I play the part of the boy. Well, some night.
Some night.
Some park.
Some park.
Some moon.
Some moon.
Some bench.
Some bench.
Some grass.
Some grass.
Some dew.
I don't.
Primarily, these big shows were done at the bases overseas, but there would be soldiers who would miss those shows, and at times, Bob and his crew would go to the front lines.
Yeah, the big show could have 10,000 there, and Bob would ask, where is everybody? Is this it? And sometimes they would have to say, obviously, we've got a company or a regiment or a platoon up here, and they're more towards the front lines than where we are now. So he and Jerry Colonna would hop in a Jeep or a truck, and they'd go up and do like a 12-minute performance for the guys who were guarding the front lines, basically. And that was pretty incredible, too. They just didn't want anybody to be left out.
Well, that was wonderful, but also very dangerous.
Yeah. Well, Bob was a daredevil. Even his wife Dolores said that he always kind of had that daredevil attitude that, when it was his time, it was his time. So they did not hang back in World War II. They went right where the battles were progressing, and especially in the Pacific. I mean, you're flying over all of that water. If something goes wrong with your plane, you're going to end up like Amelia Earhart, and they're probably not ever going to find you. And so they took a ton of risks, but they were a fearless group.
I would think one of the challenges of putting a documentary like this together would be getting the footage, because with the exception of newsreels, there really wasn't all that much footage that's available. Or did you have access to archives?
Yeah, we archived. We were able to access the archives with the Bob Hope Foundation. They had a lot of photos, especially, and other video that we had never seen. Some of it has been seen before, but we really focused on the route and the distance that they went to do this. Right in the middle of a world war, you've got Europe, you've got the Pacific, two very different theaters of war. Pacific is extremely hard to get to. So that's what we focused on. We focused on the routes that they took, not only in the United States, but also we touch on the routes in the Pacific and these islands that no Americans had ever heard of, where he went with the troop, and then right into the belly of the beast in Europe. And Bob had a battery that never drained. That was pretty much what it was.
Well, the documentary is called Miles, Morale, and Memories, Bob Hope and World War II, and we should mention that Gary Sinise narrates this documentary.
Yeah, Gary is kind of the Bob Hope of today. He goes out and he entertains the troops with his Lieutenant Dan band, and he'll be hosting the Memorial Day concert. Of course, he does that every year in Washington, and so Gary's picked up that mantle. And when you go to Gary's office, you look up and there are framed portraits and posters of Bob Hope. So Gary's very well in tune with carrying on the legacy of what Hope started in World War II.
Yeah, he's the perfect guy to do it. Well, I guess, as the old saying goes, check your local listings, because this is on PBS this month. I want to thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us for a little bit about this documentary. I'm sure everybody's going to be watching this at some point over the weekend, and I want to wish you success on future endeavors. You're doing good work here.
Thank you. We're trying. Appreciate it.